So, so Mr. Sweet, turn around there and give Jean a kiss for us. Thank you for that. So just think about how you're missing these people here, how you like to give them a hug and a kiss too. So do that in your heart now as we use this virtual technology to connect. And Jean and I have a funny story. Reverend Jean has a funny story. I used to tease her about her hair. And I cautioned her that she ought to look into that because I was pretty sure some things were growing in her hair, just like she grows things in her garden. And Reverend Jean, can you come off mute and tell them that I was right about that and just what happened there? That is my proof of there's something growing in your hair. You're still muted.
And so this ant came out of my hair and walked across my forehead, and I texted Martha and said, Martha, an ant came out of my hair just like you said, but I named it Martha, and it went back in, so it's doing fine.
So if you read the email, the little Zoom link email, and the first question on there for us to ponder today was, when's the last time you had an ant named after you? So now there's the rest of the story on Martha Creek has an ant named after her. So I'd like that to go in my biography now, which will hopefully keep people guessing. Also, get a sense of what it would be like to react to an ant crawling on you or crawling out of your hair and going across your face if you didn't mind. If you didn't mind, if you could absolutely have no offense to that. You don't have to like it a bit. You don't have to love it a bit. And what it would be like to not be offended by that. And that's the work today, I believe, people. That's the work, because until we stop this being offended, we are as violent as people with guns. We keep our violence going because the violence is created by being offended. And this maddening circle of being offended and then the offended having to offend what offended them, or having to defend against what offended them. So this is no little thing today to say that you and I hopefully have had just enough of this being offended to last us a lifetime. So that means now, when they don't agree with you, how you can stay literal in they don't agree with me, and I'm not going to be offended by this. We have a different stance on the matter, and I'm not going to take any offense to this. And they didn't invite me to their party. That's factual, and I'm not going to take offense to this. The real power, to discover the power within you to circumvent and to circuit break this offense taking. So Ken Key says it in the Handbook for Higher Consciousness. More suffering comes into the world by people taking offense than by people intending to give it. The offended ones feel the need to offend back those who they think offended them, creating defensiveness on the part of the presumed offenders, which often becomes then a new offense. So an ever-ending, eternal, infinite cycle of offend, offend, be offended, offend, be offend, offend, be offend. Ad infinitum. That leaves us stuck in the stasis of the old archaic regressive mindset of reptilian regressive behaviors and trying to righteously uphold everything that we called fine and okay and good, and then being offended by everything we said is bad, wrong, and unlike us. So until that line is taken down and the spectrum of humanity is included, I cannot know God. I know a limited version of God until I open to Alpha and Omega. All that is. Don't have to like it or love it. Don't have to condone it. Don't have to vote for it. And it's included here. It's part of the lay of the land. And my being offended by it, and my reactivity of it, and my resistance to it, and my pushing it away, and no, is what's keeping me bound in it. And then to the degree that we're living this, we can't open our own hearts to ourselves, our hearts to God. I just finished another journey through the 12-step traditions. I believe 12 steps are a spiritual path, a path for spiritual realization. I believe everybody has an addiction of some sort, and addictions are caused by thinking. So unhealed, unreconciled, unquestioned thinking causes us to reach for substance. It causes us to reach for something that we believe will ease that discomfort. And in doing so, that one of the steps, if any of you use these traditions, is to purposefully, intentionally, and deliberately make conscious contact with God. Conscious contact, conscious connection, conscious alignment, intentional, deliberate connection to the source of me, especially when I've got a knucklehead across from me. Then would be a high time to make conscious contact with a greater power than this. And until we do this, then, and the reasons we can't open our hearts like that, we can't open our hearts to the lay of the land, to people, to the full spectrum of humanness and humanity, because we have failed to align first. We've not put that pause in there that says, I've got to connect with myself. I've got to connect with the source of who I am in order for me to elevate my thinking, in order for me to stay above the line. I've got to take a step that will put me in touch with the power within me, the presence of God as my source, being breathed, and then deliberately and consciously choose something else besides that instinctual knee-jerk behavior that's dominant, and that's the oldest archetype we know, and that is 2,000 years old that we know of. And until we make this conscious contact, then we can't open our minds and hearts any further. We can't have a transformation of our mind and heart, because people then are mirroring back those aspects of ourselves that we have disintegrated, that we've denied, suppressed, depressed, disowned, put under a rock, put under a log, pretend they're not there. So until those logs are turned over, the rocks are turned over, and all the aspects of my humanness are walked out of that darkness, out of that shadow, back into the light, then people are going to trigger those in me and trigger my confusion in my mind about that. And that then I don't feel sane enough or solid enough or centered enough or brave enough to deal with it, to meet it like an adult, and not to regress to feeling like I'm a 3-year-old child. And to be, that I lose awareness of my inherent power, my innate value, my innate value that is not contingent upon or dependent upon anybody else in the world to cause that for me or to give that to me, but then to live in conscious contact with my own innate power, my own inherent value, my own innate safety that cannot be threatened or lost. And then to the degree that we can do this, we can then look more clearly, more compassionately at ourselves, at our whole humanness, all the processes of our own humanness, and get a sense of groundedness, a sense of centeredness, a sense of balance, which would bring a greater sense of fearlessness, some resourcefulness, even innovation, all of this that's available from the upper room, where we can be thoughtful in our response, intentional in our response instead of instinctual. And then just maybe we can actually look human beings in the eye with less fear and less righteous indignation in the name of spirituality or in the name of religion. So take a big deep breath. And think about today then. Like, look at the calendar. August the 30th, 2020. And that's the day that I had just enough awfulizing anything. That after today, I don't know what I'm going to say, but I know what I ain't going to say. And I will not spend another second trying to outdo somebody else's awful. And then us high righteous spiritual types will say, well, I am not negative. I do not talk about what is negative. I do not see things as awful. I do not talk in awful terms. It's like, yes, we do. It's very subtle even sometimes. And it's not so subtle at times. Somebody could call you and say, oh, I've had a rough week. I was sick 3 days, had a temperature of 102. Like, well, I was sick for 7 days and I had a temperature of 106. So I've got to outdo their awful. We call it commiserate. Commiserate. And then we keep it going. And this is when we have a lack of toleration in pain, a lack of toleration in suffering for ourselves versus growing ourselves up emotionally and spiritually that says, I have got to grow my toleration for pain. I've got to grow my toleration for pain in myself, and I've got to grow my toleration of pain in other people, and to accept that suffering is part of the human learning processes. That suffering is a part of my enlightenment. Suffering is a part of my awakening. Suffering is included here. Have you noticed? Suffering is included. It's a part of things. So then as I grow myself up, then I can have pain and accept that pain is inevitable as long as I'm in the physical. If I drop a bowling ball on my toe, pain. And if you can transcend that, good for you. You may ascend this afternoon. We want to film it, of course, so give us notice so that we can all refer to it. In the meantime, I can have the pain and then without heaping more suffering on it. Wasn't that awful? Wasn't that awful? Can you believe it? What did I do? Oh, that was so dumb. Oh my God, I should have known better. I should have thought it through. Oh my God, I could have prevented it. So then we've got the pain of the toe, and now we got all of that heaped on it, which is the suffering that is sometimes optional, that says I've dropped a bowling ball on my toe and I'm not going to shame and guilt and hate and recriminate myself over it all the way to the grave. So yes, there was mistakes. I don't know what else to call them. And they were included. They were a part of the unfolding. So whatever you've done, whatever you didn't do, was included in your human learning process, in the journey. And then some of us have more of a spine of steel. Any of you here the oldest children in your family? It's not absolute. But the oldest are like, suck it up, buttercup, wear your big girl panties. In my family, I say, it's just a broken leg. Bind the damn thing up, drag it, and let's go. I got something to do here. So we can tolerate a great deal of pain in ourselves, but we can't bear their pain. Oh, she's got a hangnail. Oh, she's upset. Oh, look how sad. Oh, so we can bear pain ourselves, but we can't bear it in others. So then we're dependent on them feeling good. Can anybody relate? And you work harder on them feeling good than they're working on them feeling good. and you're working on their life harder than they're working on their life, because we have a high tolerance of pain in ourselves and a low tolerance of pain in others, versus what if today, August 30th, today is the day to say, I'm going to know where I begin and end, and I'm going to know where they begin and end. And I'm going to take responsibility for what's actually, factually my responsibility. And I'm not going to take responsibility for things that are not mine. To liberate myself, to free myself, and to make another choice, a deliberate choice. And that means that after today, that I'm going to stop awfulizing anything. Now, I don't have to call it awesome. I don't have to go from awful to awesome. If you can, be sure to do that, because that's a generative use of the mind, a causative, deliberate use of our faculties. But until I can call it awesome, at least I'm not going to call it awful. So I'm going to fire myself from awfulizing today. And that includes looking back at everything that happened with a different framework. I don't have to like or love what happened, but I'm going to start to look at how did I benefit from it. I say in my family, they taught me how to do it and how not to. So I'm going to look at the benefits, the value, what has arisen as a result of what I lived through. How have I used that? Have I taken that SHIT and made it manure for something? That I used it to grow myself. I used it to grow. I used those challenges of my lifetime, those challenges to spur growth in me. So there's nothing that's happened that's been in vain. And I'm going to keep a different framework, a different reference from this starting today. And that's going to also include getting me off the hook. Not defiling myself. No more self-hate, blaming, shaming, guilting. Have you had enough of that to last you the rest of your life? Shame, blame, guilt, recriminating, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Why? So I call these portals to hell. Why? But because they should have, they shouldn't have, I should have, I shouldn't have. I needed them to do this. I needed them to do that. I wanted them to do this. I wanted them to do that. It's like, of course, it's wired into us, and it didn't unfold that way. That means then today to look at every single so-called mistake that we made. Call it a mistake, call it what is, call it it's included, but to get that integrated in us. So not depressed, suppressed, disowned, denied, swept under another rock, pretending, versus all of that. I'm walking everything that I have in the darkness of me, everything I have in the shadow of me is being walked out today on purpose back into the light. So you may call it forgive it. You may call it forget it. It happened, and I've got something far more interesting to look at. I've got something far more deliberate, far more intentional, far more exciting to put my focus on. Something I can do something about. And then to get a sense of what it would be like to live from that conscious contact of God. Like what we teach, what New Thought teaches us. The one power, I am in the presence of divine being. I'm in the presence of divine essence. Whoa. Then if it's true, how am I going to respond to this? So I got to get a pause in there and get conscious contact before I proceed. So pausing, presencing myself, then proceeding. Martha Creek's 3 P's, the famous 3 P's. Pausing, presencing myself, and then proceeding. And to be quicker and quicker to offer grace and mercy to yourself. And to the degree that you can and will, you'll be quicker to offer grace and mercy to someone else for your sake, not for theirs, so that you won't bind yourself up in that and bound yourself up in that. So get a sense of this in your body. If after today you're more inclined to praise your progress, to delight in the fact that I was raised in that family and I didn't shoot any of them. Now that's a miracle. We were all under that same roof and nobody went to jail. That's a miracle. I'm going to praise the progress. I caught myself as I was presenting to these healthy congregations. Trainers and facilitators years ago were required to work with a coach and make these presentations in front of these very intellectual academic types from Georgetown that have studied this theory for decades. And I caught myself each time I was up there presenting, and you stand up in front, you got to draw on a board, and you draw the genogram and the symbols for parents and grandparents and siblings and all these dynamics that are going on between them. And I caught myself bringing in proof to support how dysfunctional my family was. Can anybody relate? Anybody here ever talked about the dysfunction in your family? And that day, one day, I had had just enough of that. And that day I said, this is enough of this. This is enough of this. So from now on, anytime I present, I'm going to present with how well they did, how they lived close to the earth, how it makes sense that there would be 3 deep freezers full of food in the house. Not how much of a problem or an issue that is. So a new compassion arose, a new understanding, and how much it's benefited me, how much I learned from it, either how to do it or how not to. So what if starting today then you speak about how functional you are, how you lived through all of that, how you navigated winds that you thought you couldn't navigate, how you felt ill-equipped, how you felt like you couldn't do it, that you wouldn't make it through, and you did. Every single bit of it, you were equipped for it. No pain, no burden, no loss, no grief, no shock, no trauma that you've encountered and experienced that you weren't equipped for. Wow. I was equipped for it. I am equipped for it. Whatever comes. And one of my favorite quotes from Myrtle Fillmore, the founder of Unity, the co-founder, was, God is giving you and has given you everything you need to create the world you want to see. Well, As soon as they do that, well, as soon as she quits doing that, as soon as he's not my issue anymore, today, starting today, that I'm going to take the messes and make messages out of them. And I'm going to take the test and make a testimony out of it. And I'm going to shift these trials to triumphs. And shift this victim into victory, or victor, from victim to victor. And then to speak about it, to think about it, to lift it up. And then to live expressing that from the impression that God has made in me, of me, to me, from that impression that God has put in me, impressed by God, to express something different, radically different than what I've been doing. And the Myrtle Fillmore quote, it says, we've been given this, God has given us all this that we need. Now get at it. So imagine a woman that many over 100 years ago, with the purpose and the deliberate passion to say, we have it inside of us. She says it in this, literally quoting, God has given you the needed wisdom and power and love and sustenance to meet all requirements. Your part is to believe this, is to cultivate this, to trust this, and to lean into this, keeping busy then with the things that are yours to do, with less anxiety and concern about what others are doing. Trust God will prompt others to do their part. That frees me, folks. Instead of me prompting them to do what they need to do, me advising them, coaching them, counseling them, mentoring them, caring about them, they're being prompted by something besides me. So she says, so get busy using the truth that you know. Get busy using the truth you know. Bring forth your own joyous world of love, of beauty, of plenty, of friendship, all these tenets that we've learned for 20, 30, 40 years, some of us. Bring these forth. Get at it. And being spiritual has nothing to do with what we believe. Being spiritual has everything to do with our state of consciousness. So what if today was our day to spiritually grow ourselves up just a hair? It's much more than running around quoting Ernest Holmes, but to be in an embodiment of this and to continue to work to elevate and to change my state of consciousness, the state of the way I'm being in the world. I know who you are. I know what you are. And I know how you serve. And I serve with you. And I devote this time, this teaching, this message to the progression of my own soul and to the soul of humanity as it consciously evolves, and that we continue to stay the course with this as the tipping point for that elevation of consciousness. So be it, so it is. Amen. MarthaCreek.com if I can support you. Blessings.